Hello and welcome to Season 12, Episode 134 of the Cartridge Club's Game of the Month podcast, where we bring together members of the Cartridge Club community to discuss our monthly playthrough. If you're new to the club or you're interested in participating in future months, please join our community Discord or follow us on Twitter at Cartridge Club NA. We'd love to see the hashtag Cartridge Club used whenever you guys talk about the games we've selected. I'm Dean from Round 2 Gaming, and on behalf of our rotating pool of hosts, I want to thank you guys for tuning in. Additionally, on behalf of the entire Cartridge Club community, I want to give a huge shout out to our Patreon Club backer tier members, Ross Rengo, JJS Boyce, CalebJRoss, Christopher Rohr. Thank you guys so much. You're an integral part of what we do each and every month. It's October, normally spooky month, but this month we're going to break tradition. We're exploring a whole new genre. In our 12-year history, we've never tried a visual novel. So figure what better way to dive in than with a romantic dating sim, Doki Doki Literature Club. Joining me to talk about the game are our three panelists, who I'm super excited about. First off, we have Joel Boyce himself. He's been on shows like Celeste. I think you were on the Hades one with me. The Mario Madness one. So you're just a regular guest by now. But it's awesome to have you here. Hey, Joel.
Hey there.
We also have CalebJRoss, who is the author of one of my favorite books from last year, Suddenly I Was a Shark. Cartridge Club veteran. Obviously, you were on the What Remains of Edith Finch podcast, but you were also on, I think, Fallout 3, Witcher 3, I think, Wolfenstein you were on with me. You've been on a whole bunch of times, too. A ton of extras that we've done. So it's awesome to have you here, Caleb. Thanks for coming.
It is awesome to be here. Thank you so much for asking me.
Of course. Yeah, you and Joel are obviously advocates of the written word, both successful authors. So I figured, well, if we're looking at a literature club game, it's going to be awesome to have you guys on the podcast. And also, last but not least, probably one of the longest running supporters of the Cartridge Club that we have. I think first appearance was maybe episode 3 back in 2013. It was super. Yeah. Of course, Fitgnat.
Hey, how's it going?
Thanks for coming. When I think about anime or manga or comic books or Star Wars, like, you are the first person that comes to mind.
Yep. I spent a lot of time on all of those things.
Yeah, you'd be a perfect guest for this. So I'm really excited about this panel. But let's get started. So Doki Doki Literature Club, developed by Dan Salvato back in 2017, which was crazy to me. I feel like it's only recently been talked about, at least in my circles, but this has been around for a long time. It was originally released as freeware, meaning anybody with a PC, whether it was Linux or Mac or Windows,
caller added,
get a copy for free. Since then, it's sort of exploded. There's a new Plus version that's come out with some additional prelude features in there, but that was on Switch, that was on PS4, PS5.
I found you.
It's on the Xboxes, so this thing has been everywhere. It wasn't until this month that I actually got to try it for the first time, but I guess I want to know from you guys, and Joel, we can start with you. What was your first experience? Was this your first experience with the game? Are you a closeted visual novel aficionado?
It's not my first experience with the game. I did actually play it when it was new on PC, which is unusual for me because I never play PC games. But I grabbed the Plus version on PS4 for this month to see what that was like. So it's my first time revisiting it in, I guess, about 7 years. I would have said that this is my only visual novel experience, but then I thought about it more and I realized, no, I played the first Ace Attorney game, Phoenix Wright. I played 999, 9 persons, 9 doors, whatever that is. Enjoyed it. So I have some familiarity with the genre, but not a lot.
Yeah, I guess I didn't think I did until you mentioned Ace Attorney, and yeah, I'm really familiar with those games. I played a couple of them. I didn't really associate them with visual novels, but I guess that's exactly what they are. So that's great. Caleb, how about you? When people hear Caleb, they think waifu fetish, right?
It's how I try to broadcast myself as often as I possibly can. I'm glad it's getting out there. I remember hearing about this visual novel that was at the top of everyone's best games of the year list when this came out. It was getting these crazy Metacritic scores. Everyone is like, so the entire conversation was, can you believe a visual novel has this high of a score? And that was really what intrigued me to even pay attention to it. I'm not a visual novel player at all. Never. This is actually my first one that I've ever played, so I don't really have the history of the genre to appreciate necessarily the various spikes that this game has. But I also went into this game with it heavily spoiled for me. So I basically played it in the worst possible circumstances, but still ended up coming out loving it. So yeah.
That's awesome. And Fitgnat?
Yeah, so this was my first time playing this game, and I haven't had any great visual novel experience, but to everyone's point, Ace Attorney and stuff like that. And we actually did do 999 on one of the portable episodes that I had forgotten about, but even though we can think of several Ace Attorney and things like that, and Trauma Center and stuff like that definitely have a heavy emphasis on visual novel stuff, we haven't done any traditional pure visual novel dating sim kind of things. So this is a fresh start for that at the very least. And probably nobody has played pure visual novel dating sims anyway. The only experience I have with dating sim stuff is I've watched a couple anime adaptations of them. So
how is that crossover between anime and visual novels? Presumably there's a lot of visual novels based on anime and a lot of animes based on visual novel.
Yeah, there's a lot, and one of the less popular ones that I probably didn't need to spend my time watching was Amigami SS, which is based on a PS2 game. That one, interestingly, does actually split it into 4-episode chunks, which with each girl, going through their roots, to use the terminology for dating sims, they all have their own roots. So they adapted them individually. But when people typically think of dating sim anime adaptations, probably key animation stuff Clannad and Canon and Air. I don't know if that one's actually based on a visual novel, but yeah. And probably the most famous visual novel adaptation, not dating sim though, is Fate Stay Night.
Oh right, yeah, of course.
And of course it overlaps a lot with tropes, which this game takes heavy use of. So to bring it back around to the game, this game does use a lot of the tropey stuff in dating sim and just otherwise romance anime and manga.
Yeah, I'm excited to dive into that. Joel, I know you mentioned you played it on PS4. You guys as well, Caleb, Fitgnat, you guys played it on console?
Yeah, console. I played it on a Switch, which when you learn more about the game, you realize a console probably isn't the best way to play the game, but it still got its message across just fine, I think.
Yeah, they adapted it over pretty well. But I've heard some funny things about how it differs on PC as well. But it was good timing for PlayStation Plus to have that as one of their games of the month, as we're having it as our game of the month.
Yeah, I mean, if you were to I wish I could just hire somebody to go through and find all these CC Effect months, because it is scary how often we pick a game and then there's an announcement of a sequel, of a remaster, of it being free on PSN, it being the game of the month here. It just always happens. And this past season has just been every month.
Yeah, and this month specifically, it being October, it's not we're not doing the game, but it is funny to have that there's a Silent Hill 2 remake, and that was episode 2 for us.
That was our first Halloween special. Yeah, that's totally right.
Yeah.
Crazy. So we will keep trailblazing over here and do Half-Life next.
In our defense, the free game for PlayStation Plus was announced after we picked Doki Doki Literature Club. So
now you've got to start using this power for good. And what's a remake that people want, Bloodborne or something? Have you guys done Bloodborne yet?
We have done Bloodborne, and we did Days Gone last month, and nobody's talked about that game since it came out. And then last month it was the director left, and then they put him in Astro's Playroom, and then I was just getting a ton of rumors about a sequel or a remaster. So yeah, we'll keep going. But anyway, back to this game, Doki Doki Literature Club. I want to get into the game's story. It's I don't want to say it's your typical sort of romantic visual novel storyline, but if you can imagine a bunch of high schoolers in Japanese suburbia. That's sort of what this is. You play as the main character, who's a guy. He's on his way to school in the morning with his book bag, and he's walking through the suburbs, and he is flagged down by a girl named Sayori, who was his childhood friend, his best friend, a neighbor, and she insists on walking to school with you, and she's sort of interrogating you on what sort of extracurricular club you've joined, which is a popular thing in Japanese culture. And you've obviously not chosen a club yet. You haven't really put much thought into it. So as soon as school's over, she comes up to you and she's like, "Hey, why don't you join the literature club? It's a club I'm part of, and I would love to do that with you." And you're sort of reluctant, but you ultimately agree to join this literature club, which is sort of like a book / poetry, anything to do with literature, just a small club after school. So you go to the classroom and you meet all the members of the literature club. Joel, why don't you give us a bit of a rundown of these characters, because they're really the four main characters that appear in the game. This is who you have to know.
So Sayori is, sort of your old friend and neighbor, and they say in the opening that you used to walk to school with her every day, but then she kind of started sleeping in later and later, and then it just kind of stopped happening. And so you sort of reconnect with her. She's like the girl next door, I guess. Maybe not the typical girl next door. She's kind of distracted. She's clumsy sometimes. She can be irresponsible, but she's really, really sweet. She really cares about everyone else's feelings. She's always kind of in tune to what everyone else is feeling around them, and she's a little ray of sunshine in the room. So, really nice. Then you meet the other three members of the literature club, and Yuri, I think, is the one that stands out to me as the most different from the other three. She's visually different. She's tall with long dark hair. Everyone has kind of lighter hair. She's a little bit just a little bit different and personality wise as well. She's the one that's introverted. She's very thoughtful when she speaks. She takes a long pause and thinks about what she wants to say before she says it, whereas everyone else kind of speaks their mind, speaks quickly, and is high energy. So you kind of get the feeling like she's someone that maybe you have to work at getting to know. She's not an open book. There are hidden depths there. So there's a sort of maybe an allure with Yuri that I think is intentional. Then Natsuki is kind of the younger one of the group. That's sort of established in the story, whether that means everyone else is like a junior or a senior, and maybe she's like a sophomore. They don't specify. She's also short in stature, and she has like a slight figure, and everyone says she's really, really cute, which she doesn't like. She's a bit of a firebrand. She's very loud and brash, and she says what's on her mind, and she calls people out if she thinks they're not respecting her. And she's the one who seems, out of everyone, who seems to be the least interested in getting to know the player character. And then lastly, you have Monica. And Monica is the president of the literature club. So definitely the blandest character at first glance. But her personality fits her role in the club and in the game. She's the one that kind of interjects with information. She's kind of gives some expository information. She gives some player information, and she helps to transition scenes from one to another. So she's kind of just has her this kind of upbeat, confident, assertive, but not aggressive attitude. And she's friendly and perfectly serviceable personality for the role that she plays. But then, whenever she wasn't speaking, I wasn't really thinking about her.
Yeah, you mentioned people like Natsuki who look particularly young. I think it's worth noting at the very beginning of the game, there's a very clear disclaimer that all of these girls are in fact above the legal age, just in case there's any doubts there. So, but Natsuki for me definitely felt like a little young for me to be trying to romance that character.
Yeah, that is not at all a convincing disclaimer.
Yeah, that's right. I did, I guess, immediately gravitate toward Yuri for reasons, but yeah, I'm surprised there's only this many characters, and I think in order to dive into the personalities and really understand them, I understand why, but In some of the other things like Boyfriend Dungeon I've played, there's a huge cast of characters to choose from a ton of different archetypes, and this really seems like hyper focused on some really popular archetypes from anime that over exaggerate some of the characteristics, and I think Fitgnat, you'd have better knowledge of sort of what those are called or what.
Sayori is very much like the Genki girl, and Natsuki is the tsundere. They even put in a line, like, it's not like I made them for you or anything, which is a very, very common kind of made fun of.
Yeah, I guess I always go back to Sailor Moon. I don't know if you guys watched that growing up, but I feel like people of my generation always had like a favorite Sailor Scout. And I could pick any one of them except Sailor Mercury, like that bookish, like, shy person. I hated that. I hated her. Stupid short blue hair. And in this, I found myself like wanting to go with Yuri, who I would probably draw the biggest parallel to, because she's shy and reserved and a little bookish, and it was odd how I don't want to say attracted, that's not the right word, but I was gravitating toward Yuri when I hated Sailor Mercury so much.
It would be interesting to know how intentional that design was from the developer's perspective, because I just doing sort of armchair surveys with people and doing some research before this, what I have found is that it does seem to be that Yuri is the one that a lot of people sort of are drawn to, and it's the character that a lot of people are sort of intentionally trying to romance. And again, the visual design, as you mentioned earlier, Dean, is very striking, very different. So automatically, just visually, you're drawn to this person. And it would be interesting to know how many subtle sort of suggestions there are within the game that sort of lead most people or a lot of people to the path of Yuri. It could be that she's just so much, not just visually different, but she doesn't smile when all the other ones are always smiling. Like, there's all these kind of things that almost tell you, like, this is the character that I should think about and I should allocate a lot of my brain space toward. So let me go in that direction, because I was definitely Team Yuri as well.
Yeah, same, but I think it's worth noting that she is literally referred to as Girl 1 before you get her name in the dialogue, so it's not the most subtle thing in the world. But I also I didn't go in with any kind of dedicated choice, like, oh, I'm going to go with this character first. But her dialogue at the very start with the introductions, that seemed like the most active, actual conversation, like getting to know this character. She, despite being the introvert, she was the one, like, immediately talking to you and, like, telling you about herself and trying to get to know you a little bit. Yeah, so that just ended up going that way. I did partly go that way because I thought I was going to be given more choices in dialogue and what I was able to do later, but I did not find that to be the case, which is one of my very few complaints about the game. Is like, I would like a little bit more choice, specifically for, like, not even like what choices do during major events. That was done fairly well, but like just during regular dialogue, that's a thing that seems to be a little bit missing from this, that I would expect from a visual novel story, where you don't choose your own dialogue all that often.
Yeah, there's a lot of novel and not a lot of choice for a big chunk of this.
Part of that might just be like how many RPGs have like dialogue choice now, like Mass Effect, and like even I think Assassin's Creed Valhalla has it, and just a lot of games like that. So maybe I'm thinking there's more choice for that than typical, because it's such a normal thing now.
Yeah, that's a really good contrast. Like, I'm such an apologist when it comes to like making decisions just in real life, and just having the binary, like, go with this person or this person, after school. It's just like, oh God, but I want to apologize to this person first. And then I'm going to really lightly agree to go to this person. Anyway, we're talking about building relationships. Caleb, why don't you tell us about sort of the main romancing mechanic in this? Because it's not all just clicking, I guess, decision points in a checklist. There's actually sort of a fun interactive mechanic there.
Yeah, and it really is kind of the only mechanic. I mean, to Fitgnat's point, he would like more choice. And this poetry mechanic is really the only true choice that the player has. And ultimately, that choice isn't even really that deterministic, but it's at least the only part in which the player feels like they have a semblance of choice, some sort of agency over the way that the game goes. And the way this is presented is as part of your involvement in this literature club, you are tasked with writing poems. Each person in this club is tasked with writing poems, obviously, but you are, as the player, writing your own poems. And this largely takes the shape of just choosing words. You get basically a list of words from a word bank, and you kind of choose which one that you want to choose. The game doesn't really give you any context, doesn't give you any direction about why you're choosing what words you're choosing. There's a little bit of feedback in the sense that there are these little avatars of the girls sort of in the corner of your screen, and as you choose words, they will react in some way, and the player is led to believe that certain words will please certain girls in various degrees. And so if there is a character that you are trying to romance, you would try to find the words that would make that particular avatar, move or bounce or whatever. But it's pretty limited in that there's no immediate feedback, or I guess no concrete feedback for whether or not you made the quote unquote correct choice for the path that you want to go down. I did do quite a bit of research or I guess watched a few YouTube videos. When I say research, it makes it sound like I was doing a lot of heavy lifting. No, I've watched a few YouTube videos about the actual game mechanics, and there is some math behind it, and there's some sort of fuzzy logic behind it that sort of guides the results. It's not nearly as binary as you might think, but at the end of the day, it's still largely a superficial choice that you're making, and it doesn't have any real major impact on the game. But again, it's sort of a breather between tons of reading, tons of being passive in this game. The game is largely 90% passive. This is the only time when you can be a little bit active. So they were nice. They were well met points of activity that in an otherwise you're just reading all the time. So they were kind of nice.
The only bit of actual gameplay in the game.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And me not being familiar, and this is actually a great group, because me having no familiarity with visual novels or even dating sims at all, I thought this must be how they always are, is you're basically just kind of reading, making some superficial choices, and that's kind of it. So I just accepted it as, this is just what it is. You don't really have much control or agency over things, and that's all there is to it. And I imagine that the genre is much deeper than that, because this is a game that's specifically curated to deliver a very specific response. It's not necessarily meant to be a dating sim. It's just sort of in the guise of a dating sim.
Yeah, it being a video game at all, I mentioned this in the Discord, feels almost more like a framing device for the plot itself rather than a necessity.
Absolutely.
But at the same time, that plot makes it very difficult to, if you would want to adapt it into any other medium, it wouldn't really work.
And so with the poetry, the poetry sort of seeds then the next sort of, I guess you could call it a branch, or the next sort of portion of the game, depending on who you write a poem for. This first time, you write many poems throughout the game, but this first one sort of sets up the illusion of choice in a way that the game doesn't necessarily follow up on, but ultimately what it does is it allows you to sort of hone in on a particular character and interact a little bit with that character. If you sort of write the poem for Natsuki, you sort of you read some manga with her, basically. It doesn't really get much deeper than that. If you go Yuri's route, she will bring a book called The Portrait of Markov, which I don't know if that's an actual real book or not. I didn't look into that. But she brings this book, and there's a interesting, fun little exchange, a misunderstanding sort of exchange, in which you, as the player character, thinks that she read the book or she brought the book for you, I think is what it was, but she denies that that's not the case. And so it creates this sort of friction between the two of you that ultimately is, I think, probably what continues to keep people interested in Yuri as one of the options. Again, speaking to the design choices I mentioned earlier, I think that's intentional. There's that conflict, is players follow conflict. And so that little bit of conflict, that little bit of tension there helps, I think, endear people to Yuri. And then lastly, Sayori's route, the protagonist will end up basically falling asleep, and that's kind of it. um, there's not really a whole lot of depth in any of these choices, but yeah, that's about it.
One thing that I thought was interesting about the choices is the one place where you can kind of close off a relationship is if you do go with Yuri. At some point, you stop getting anything at all from Natsuki because she just starts calling you out and saying you're just trying to impress Yuri, and she starts hating your poem so much that I think the last one she refuses to even engage with you. But if you go with Natsuki, you'll still get those interactions with the other two players. If you go with Sayori, you'll still get interactions with the other two players. But if you go with Yuri, Natsuki just gets increasingly upset with you until she's just done.
I wonder if I just accepted that as, yeah, you're right. I am trying to romance Yuri. All right, let's move along. Let's keep yeah, you're calling me out. It's true.
Of all the poems, though, I did. I'm not a big poetry guy. I did like Natsuki's poem.
Yeah.
I felt it was so profound, just even outside of the game. It's called Eagles Can Fly, and it goes, monkeys can climb, crickets can leap, horses can race, owls can seek, cheetahs can run, eagles can fly, people can try, but that's about it.
Yeah.
And I didn't understand it, but it sounds so profound.
Yeah.
And I'm like, if this was like a children's book where you can imagine it like a, children's book with some paintings in it, and you get to that last page where it's just like, people try, but...
Yeah. See, I'm not a poetry guy either, but her poems are definitely the ones that I appreciated the most. A lot of hers are like that, where it seems very rote, very simple, easy to understand language, in a way that the language is so simple that you, as the reader, are trying to impart meaning upon it. The words aren't trying to make things meaningful. The words are instead just offering themselves up, and then you're forced to sort of impart meaning on them because there's not a whole lot there. But she always ends her poems with a line that makes you reevaluate or re-see the entire preceding poem in a different way. And I do like that a lot. None of the other poems or none of the other writers in this game did that. And so, yeah, I did appreciate her poems most, I think.
Yeah, and the style of the poems is obviously a point of conflict between her and Yuri a lot in the game as well.
Now, Joel, I saw you posted something earlier. You got the platinum on this one, and one of the platinum trophies, one of the trophies to get the platinum, is to write perfect poems for each person. Did you find like you were able to sort of understand which words fit within each person, or were you using a guide? Like, how did that work for you?
Yeah, so I did do it without a guide because I thought, well, if this is the only mechanic in the game, I should probably not cheat for the entirety of the game. So I worked at it. I did do some save scumming. Like I would, if I screwed up a poem, then I would reset it. But you have to start from the beginning every single time. It doesn't let you just like do it for each word. So it's still like legit. So it's deceptively difficult because it seems like, okay, I got the idea. There are categories of words that each girl likes. So like Natsuki is a baker. There's a bunch of things that are related to like cooking and baking and cookies and candy and cute things and manga. And if you say those things, she'll like them. And then, Sayori likes things that are like emotion words. So if you see emotion words like joy, sadness, like she likes those. But then there are all these exceptions. So every category has, 10 words in a category that go with one of the girls. But then there are one or two exceptions that go somewhere else. And it makes sense in retrospect, like angry is an emotion word, but it actually belongs to Natsuki because she's the angry one. But there are enough of those that you have to, through trial and error, like get the sense of the categories that go with each girl, but also start to learn the exceptions and just remember, oh, but that's one of the exceptions that goes somewhere else. It took a while before I was able to do it, but I got to a point where I was able to do it once I got that trophy, and I played a bunch more because I was trying to get other trophies and unlock more content. once I got that trophy on subsequent playthroughs, I found that I was able to get close to a perfect score most of the time. I don't think you actually need to get 20 out of 20 for a perfect poem, despite the name of the trophy. I think you just need to get a certain number of points. I think it's more like if you get 15 out of 20, that actually counts. But I was shooting for 20 out of 20 because I assumed that was what I need to do.
Yeah, the research that I was doing before this, the math is really interesting in that every word has 3 different values, and I won't bore the listener with all of the details, but just to give some sort of insight into some of the math that's at play, is the person who ends up getting wooed, I guess you could say, is the one there's a total point count, and whoever has sort of the highest point count or whatever, that's the character that you go for. But each word each word is assigned a numerical value of 1, 2, or 3, and one character, if that's a word that speaks to them, it's a 2. If it's a word they actively hate, it might be a 1 point count. If it's sort of neutral, it might be a 2. So there's all this kind of math going in play, and then there is a chance in which you could actually have a tie or something, and then it kind of the way in which it breaks a tie is kind of weird. It was pretty interesting. I could definitely see how the developer might have just like put all of these values into a spreadsheet to figure it out first and then made the game around it, which is the exact kind of game development that I love doing, is like, let's make it a spreadsheet first, and if I can make the spreadsheet interesting, then I'll just slap on some mechanics to it, and that'll make it great. So yeah.
Hey, can you hear me?
I did notice as I was looking through the game that there is a way to tell which words, like very explicitly, which words have what values and what goes to who. Also, I did appreciate something else that goes into that, and it kind of rewards replaying and paying attention, is there's a lot of the words that you would see in the poem game sprinkled through the dialogue of each character. Like, even when someone's like talking about somebody else, like, oh, like one of the most typical ones, like, oh, she's a bit clumsy, isn't she? For like talking to Sayori, so that's one of her words. But that happens a lot. Like, you start, when you replay it, you notice a lot of those words pop up in the game itself.
So yeah, that's essentially the gameplay loop, right? You go through a couple days of this and write a couple different poems and
I knew
romance
you'd be
a couple
watching the
different women,
premiere.
and it's all leading up to this big festival that's coming up on Monday. So the weekend's coming up, and you have an opportunity to either help Yuri or Natsuki with the festival stuff. So maybe Fitgnat, you can sort of share what each of those dates looks like and what happens subsequently to the weekend.
Yeah, so the home dates are actually kind of fun. Like, with when you pick Yuri, you're obviously doing the decorations, and then with Natsuki, you're helping her with the cupcakes.
Ugh, lame.
There are a lot of cute moments for each of them. One thing that I noticed, I actually ended up replaying a portion of one, is that both Yuri's and Natsuki's end up with one of you sucking the other person's finger, like in one way or the other. Like, I don't know why that's in both of them.
Yeah, I didn't realize that finger sucking thing, but when you mentioned it, yeah, I definitely remember sucking on both fingers, which should have been a trophy.
I am filling up my hard drive with clipped audio here. This is going to be great fodder for blackmail later on. Thank you, guys.
So is it safe to say all of our first go-throughs of this were the Yuri sort of decoration building weekend?
Yeah, even though this was a second playthrough for me, I still couldn't help myself. I did the same thing I did 7 years ago. I went with Yuri. Although, the Natsuki weekend is actually kind of nice. It's just, she's so brash and kind of annoying early on. You just kind of dismiss her. It's like, oh, I'm going to go after Yuri. But it's kind of nice to see her with her guard down on a subsequent playthrough.
It was super charming. I really, really liked that date. Like, irrespective of like dating sim genre as a whole, like that was definitely tugged at some heartstrings when you could break through somebody's guard like that.
I didn't care all that much for Natsuki when I was first going through the Yuri plot, so when I got to like that home date in her playthrough, it was just a lot better than I expected. Like, just the entire Natsuki playthrough well, most of the Nachi playthrough was a lot better than I was expecting it to be. So I was pleasantly surprised there with her.
Yeah, the funny thing is, and this kind of goes back to what I think Caleb had said earlier about the game sort of subtly guiding you, and as shown by our small scale poll of all four of us picking Yuri on the first go, you get this feeling like Yuri's the one that's going to be harder to win over, and she's got these hidden depths, and she's quiet. And in reality, Natsuki's the one that's really hard to win over, and she actually does have hidden depths, but you just kind of think that she's all on the surface. So it's easy to dismiss her on a first run through the game.
So you've baked some muffins, you've sucked some fingers, and then you sort of are outside of your house, and that was the epitome of romance for these girls. They start to really have some feelings for you, and you guys get into a little bit of an embrace, maybe almost a kiss. But right then, Sayori walks up and sees it. This is your best friend from childhood, who's been sort of pushing you on to explore and to meet some friends, but you can see how distraught she is from seeing you with somebody else. So there's a lot of emotion there, and you end up going to her house to talk to her, just to make sure everything's okay. And you go up to her room, and she seems naturally upset, but also wanting the best for you and still putting on a smile, right? She's she sort of explains her position and doesn't want you to feel bad about it, and you essentially leave her house knowing that she saw what you were doing, but she wants to support you as best she can. Cue the night scene. Sleep, wake up the next morning to go to school, and you arrive at school and realize that Sayori didn't come in today. Yuri's here, and Monika's here, and Natsuki's here, but Sayori's still at home. So you thought it was weird that you walked to school and she wasn't there cheerfully to pick you up from home for the walk, and so you rush back to her place, and you get into her house, and you knock on her door, and there's no answer. And it's worth noting that, like, tonally the game totally shifts here from a very upbeat, happy dating sim-esque music and style to a very somber, very ominous background sounds and just overall feel. And you open the door, and there, hanging in the middle of her room, is Sayori. And it's just a horrible scene to see, but for close observers, you'll see that she has bloody fingers, right? She hung herself, but she actively at some point tried to undo that action. She regretted that. And the main character, the character you play, is going through like a severe sort of mental battle there, where you can sort of see your character's dialogue throughout the game, but you see this conflict of, like, what did I do? Like, how did I not see this? What is happening? This isn't a game that I can just load, and then you think, oh man, I can just load and change. And you try to load, and there's no more save files. Like, you cannot get out of this. You are stuck on this path where Sayori has regrettably hung herself. And it was, for me, again, knowing that there was a twist in this game, knowing that there was like some ominous thing that happened, I didn't expect it to be this and sort of this dichotomy from a very, very enjoyable weekend with baking muffins and making decorations to the next day, like staring at this in the room. So I don't know about you guys, but I just want to open it up. Like, what did you guys think about that scene? Did you see it coming? Did you have a feeling like, yeah, this is where she's headed, or how did that impact you?
I did see it coming, only because that very specific thing was in fact spoiled for me. So I knew that going into it. However, that being said, it was still one of those images that still shakes you. Even it's a cartoon. It's it's a two-dimensional image of people who aren't real, but it's still a very like it shook me. And it's interesting you mentioned the the somber tone of the game, and there's so few cinematic flourishes that this game can do that even with the music somber and sort of the tone being as somber as it possibly can, you're still dealing with static 2D images with no motion and just text on the lower third of the screen. So you can't really, as the game itself can't really do much to sort of hint at this. And it just sort of blasts it in your face. And I think that's the only thing it could do, but that's also what made it pretty impactful, I think, is that they couldn't sort of lead up to it with a slow camera or anything like that. It had to be like, there's nothing else we can do. We just kind of have to, there it is. As sudden as if you were, as the protagonist, actually just suddenly seeing this thing and shocking you, it was interesting for sure.
Yeah, I agree that it was pretty shocking, but I also did kind of see it coming. I didn't get anything for what actually happened in the game spoiled for me. I knew kind of the horror aspect of it that it goes into, but I didn't know anything that actually happened. So I wasn't expecting anything specific, but like you can tell, like, because that's the second time you're visiting the house. It plays out almost the same, but there's something just wrong with that second visit. So I knew when the door opened it was going to be something, but that still is a pretty severe image to be confronted with. And to your point of them not usually doing much with characters in motion and everything, that is the moment that they choose to break convention with how the game is presented to you up until that point, because there's like camera motion and there's zoom in and there's the static and error message and all that, and that's part of the shock of it, because it not only breaks the narrative convention but also breaks the visual and thematic convention, and it starts with the meta aspects of the storyline for the back half. So it just kind of breaks everything visually, emotionally, narratively, everything.
Yeah, I think I can picture where I was when I played it back in 2017. I think I was in bed next to my wife trying to explain why I had a bunch of anime girls on the screen, and I said, no, there's more to this. And then I was playing it for a couple of nights, and then I got to this scene and I did not see it coming. I knew there was something with this game. It was getting all this buzz. I didn't really know. It's like but don't spoil it. Just check it out. So I did, I was surprised when there were mentions of like her mental health struggles in an earlier conversation. I thought, well, that's a weird, unexpected shift. But I didn't expect that, and it might have been one of the most shocking experiences I've had playing a game. Not thinking of anything else off the top of my head, where it's a jump scare where you're not expecting a jump scare, but it also had emotional impact, because in the few hours you've been playing the game up to this point, you might say, "Oh, I'm not into dating sims," but you do end up finding, getting to know and liking these characters. So it's not just a shock; it's also very upsetting.
For sure. Yeah, I want to move on to what happens next, but I just really quickly, I read the poem from Sayori after all the events, and I thought it was pretty powerful and pretty surprising that I missed sort of the meaning. So I just want to read that really quick. It's a little longer, but it is pretty profound as well. So Sayori writes this poem, and she says, "I pop off my scalp like the lid of a cookie jar. It's a secret place where I keep all my dreams, like balls of sunshine, all rubbing together like little bundles of kittens. I reach inside with my thumb and forefinger and pluck one out. It's warm and tingly. But there's no time to waste. I put it in a bottle to keep it safe, and I put the bottle on the shelf with all the other bottles. Happy thoughts, happy thoughts, happy thoughts, all in bottles, all in a row. My collection makes me lots of friends. Each bottle a starlight to make amends. Sometimes my friends feel a certain way. Down comes a bottle to save the day. Night after night, more dreams, friend after friend, more bottles. Deeper and deeper my fingers go, like exploring a dark cave, discovering the secrets hiding in the nooks and crannies. Digging, digging, scraping and scraping. I blow the dust off my bottle caps. It doesn't feel like time's elapsed. My empty shelf could use some more. My friends look through my locked front door. Finally all done, I open up and in come in my friends. In they come in such a hurry. Do they want my bottles that much? I frantically pull them from the shelf, one after the other, holding them out to each and every friend, each and every bottle. But every time I let one go, it shatters on the tile between my feet. Happy thoughts, happy thoughts, happy thoughts, all in shards all over the floor. They were supposed to be for my friends who aren't smiling. They're all shouting, they're pleading, something. But all I hear is echo, 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 echo inside my head. I thought that was like a super powerful poem, like after the fact. And I read it and I didn't even like put two and two together beforehand. So
I shoot poetry snaps. There you go.
sweet. All right. Okay. Sounds good. So we see
It's
this
too crowded in here.
horrific scene. Caleb, why don't you take us into what happens next?
So you wake up the next morning, you go to school.
Hello and welcome to Season 12, Episode 4 of the Cartridge Club's Game of the Month podcast, where we bring together members of the Cartridge Club community to discuss our monthly playthrough. It's October, and this month we're sticking with tradition and we're playing a horror game, a psychological horror game to be precise, and what better way to do that than with Doki Doki Literature Club. Joining me to talk about the game are our two panelists. First off, we have Joel Boyce.
Hey guys.
Himself. He's been on shows like Celeste. I think you were on the Hades one with me.
Can you hear me?
Mario Madness
Hello?
one.
Can you hear me?
You're just a regular guest by now. But it's awesome to have you. So let's dive right into the story, because this isn't your regular dating sim. You play
Guys,
as a guy. He lives
we already
in,
talked about
Japanese
this.
Collar
suburbia.
drop.
You're on your way to school in the morning, and after class, a girl named Monica shows up, and she's looking for materials for her after-school literature club, and she ultimately convinces you to join this club. And here's where you meet the game's main cast of characters. You got Yuri, you got Natsuki, and you got Monica. Joel, Fitgnat, do you guys want to talk a little bit about some of the early story beats?
You end up going to the literature club, and Monica introduces you to these two other characters. And Natsuki's the younger looking, kind of shy but willing to engage. And then Monica is there to kind of just to set everything up and plan activities and tell you how the whole thing works. And then you kind of realize, I'm attending this literature club with these three cute girls, and I wonder who I'm going to get to know better. And then kind of introducing this whole kind of dating sim trope. But then there are these kind of weird undercurrents that kind of pop up as we go.
Yeah, thank you. These undercurrents are a little more subtle at the beginning, but they get more and more just in your face. I don't know, Fitgnat, if you ran into, because every time you play through the game, you get sort of different scenes. It's not always the same events that happen.
Oh yeah, there's specific glitch scenes that you can get that pop up at different... Yeah, things just start to go haywire pretty quick.
I felt like there were like a couple of different layers of this, because there was the stuff that was in dialogue where it just seemed like a little bit, someone would say something that was like a little bit off color, or someone would say something that was kind of passive aggressive, almost not even passive aggressive, maybe sometimes actively aggressive. You get an interest from these girls and you just kind of think everyone's all going to be friends at the surface, but kind of underneath you're like slowly kind of working your magic and you're romancing one of them. But actually what's bubbling up to the surface is the girls kind of having all these old issues with each other that are coming up. And then you're kind of pulled into the center of it. And then there's this second layer of things where something really, really crazy will happen, where there'll be a glitch and there'll be a different kind of a font, and there'll be an audio difference. and someone will say something that's really insane, something violent and horrific, and then the scene continues, and then no one acknowledges it, including your player character. So it's for the player. It's not for the player character. The player knows what's going on, but then everyone else kind of gets back on script. But it's just a little bit off kilter. You kind of get the sense of, oh yeah, we're using the trappings of a gaming of a dating sim, but it's not a dating sim.
Yeah, some of those different conversation layers can like take you pretty off guard. Like there's cursing at certain points. It's not that scandalous, but in the game so far, it had just been so prim and proper for the most part, and then it's just like, it's like what's wrong with your fucking head? Like
Yeah.
just getting into these fights like that, just so blunt and right out of nowhere to what you're used to.
And then you get even more if you pick a girl to romance. If you romance Yuri, you get some. You kind of find out some kind of dark things about her in the first couple of days. If you romance Natsuki, you find out some dark things about
Nobody
her in the
cares
first
about
couple
her.
of days, and you realize everyone has something going. Well, not Monica, but everyone else has something going on. So Natsuki, there are hints of her experiencing abuse. With Yuri, there are hints of self harm. So it gets pretty scary and pretty uncomfortable. I don't know how much of a background you guys have with dating sims or visual novels. I don't have much, but I kind of got the sense that even though there's this, you're trying to date someone, it's always kind of like PG or PG-13 maybe. It's kind of like prim and proper and like I want to fall in love and maybe hold hands, and and everyone kind of acts kind of clueless, like as to, oh, what's dating? Oh, I never thought of, you might like me and like me. I always kind of thought that was like sort of the anime dating high school life story. Like it was just like a sort of innocence to it, and that's not what we see in this game.
Yeah, that is typically how it goes. Like, there's a lot of well-worn tropes, and this genre, it got really bogged down in it. I think that's why we don't really see, at least translated, any that are typical anymore. It's mostly just like meta commentaries on the genre now, or different plays on it, like with Ace Attorney and all that, like throwing in detective elements and different mini games just to vary it up. This comes in as another kind of meta commentary, and it's pretty blatant and interesting with how it does it. Actually, a lot of like the glitch scenes that you get in this section of the game, I actually kind of found them darkly funny. Specifically, one of my favorite moments of the game that just comes out of nowhere. When you're trying, and I'll use the word trying, to play Natsuki's route during this section, people just start dismissing her more and more, and she gets more and more pissed about it. And at some point, she just starts screaming, "Play at me!" And then there's a moment just of pause, and there's just snap, and her neck goes completely sideways, and there's an end screen, and then it goes back like nothing happened. I could not stop laughing.
Well, the thing is, we haven't really connected with them, right? We don't really know these girls. We kind of come into this thing and say, oh, it's going to be like a dating sim, and we're going to get to know the characters, but it so quickly goes off the rails, right? And there's a poem from Natsuki that you get where it just seems like it's nonsense. It's just a bunch of random letters and numbers, uppercase and lowercase mixed. But it turns out, I found on one of the wikis for this game, that it's actually in base 64 code, and you can translate it and actually get an actual story for it. And the poem turns out to be about uh, a killer's point of view while murdering someone with a knife.
So that dialogue that you get that just looks like gibberish, that is translatable?
Apparently, and that's why I'm so glad that when a game like this has these Easter eggs, I'm glad when there's a fan community that can dig them up and I can read about them on the wiki, because I'm not going to figure that out.
There's a specific section of the game that I would be very curious what that long translation turns into.
Oh, I don't know if it's translatable every time. That's a good question. That's something you should look into.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned that the net snapping glitch there, but I didn't see that till my second playthrough. I did see one where Natsuki's eyes and mouth just sort of blacked out a little bit with like black scribbles and then went back to normal. That one kind of freaked me out because that was almost like a jump scare. It just happened for a second. I did see one where Natsuki's mouth became like a human mouth, like a like an in real life, like a human's mouth.
Yeah, like one of those memes that they do with the cutouts, or like they'll superimpose their mouth over like a fruit or something or a cat.
Exactly.
I didn't get that one, but
I don't think I saw that one either.
Yeah, I got one where I don't know if this would actually be a glitch one, because that might just be part of the plot where it's not actually her talking, obviously, in the narrative at that point, but her face just goes completely blank. Like, no features at all, just complete white.
Oh, wow. So yeah, all these glitches start to build around sort of the horror element of the game. So the first day or two, these characters are one thing. Yuri is sort of a reserved and shy, but you start to see, to your point, Joel, some of the self-harm and some of the stuff that's happening behind the curtain. Natsuki, the firebrand, the really feisty one, she's having domestic abuse at home, and so you start to learn a little bit more, but clearly there's something else happening here. And you notice that no matter how hard you try to romance Natsuki, even if you're going for sort of a perfect run, Yuri is the one that's really pulling for your attention. You can't really get away from it, to the point where she really wants to spend some time with you and do some extracurricular stuff, even in the classroom. And Monica is a little resistant to that at first, but it ultimately allows Yuri to spend some more time with you, and that's kind of where the big event happens.
Yeah. So like where this kind of where we kind of get the climax, because it seems like you've been leading up to, there's going to be you're going to get to know these girls better, and you have a choice in what kind of relationship you want to pursue. But you kind of get pulled into this thing with Yuri, who maybe you were interested in the first place, but if it gets, even if you were kind of going after her, you maybe kind of start feeling like you want to maybe back off because she gets really weird.
There's a little devil inside all of us.
Loud and violent, and she chases the other girls out of the room and says, I'm so happy to be with you. This is all I want. And then she, her mind completely breaks, and then she takes out a knife that she likes to play with, and she ends up stabbing herself.
All I did was untie the knot.
What's interesting here is not only it's a shocking and violent event, but as the blood is coming out of her, you can if you look at it, you'll see that some of what's coming out of her looks like it's code. Like it looks like digital symbols from some kind of a coding language, and it kind of reinforces what you've been seeing with the glitches, where like there's something broken in this universe.
All I wanted was for you to hate them. Why was that so hard?
And at this point, the game itself seems to break, and you can't seem to end the scene. And instead, you just get a bunch of nonsense texts from her, which, I guess we'll have to look into see whether that can be translatable. But you kind of skip the text and skip the text and skip the text and skip the text. And there's an auto skip option you can use where it goes in fast forward. And even in fast forward, it takes a long time, because you end up being stuck in the room with the dead girl for the entire weekend while she's still spewing out text, despite having killed herself. It's a really weird, disconcerting experience. And then finally, it's Monday morning.
I found that to be another really affecting scene for, obviously the death part of it, but I really enjoyed the narrative and meta use of it, because, when I realized I would have to use the skip dialogue feature to get through the scene, that just delighted me. Just in terms of confronting the expectation there. It's interesting because if you notice, as you go through that, even if it's skipping, you can notice, the color temperature change. It goes from day to night and then night to day several times. And if you pay attention to the art of her, her eyes start going dim, and her cheeks start getting shallower, and she starts getting more pale. It's just really disturbing, but also kind of darkly funny. As I mentioned before, it's just
yeah, really. And it's cool, and this is sort of explicitly called out afterwards. But you kind of realize, okay, so how this works is there's dialogue, and I have these different interactions, and I have some element of choice that can determine how things go, and we go from one scene to another, and like basically the scene can't end because the character has died. So there's just like there's no way to go to the next scene, and that's why you're trapped in it. It's a weird it's an interesting meta aspect of it where you're thinking about like the game itself is not working.
Yeah, I manually went through 2 days, 2 full days, thinking that surely there's a trophy here if you just don't skip. And as soon as I noticed the light cycle changing, I thought, yeah, okay, for sure, I can keep track. There is something happening here. It's not a forever loop. And after 2 days, I was like, it's a forever loop for sure. And so I fast forwarded it and it stopped at 3 days. I was like, no, I'm gonna have to redo this whole thing. But there's no trophy. But anyway, you get to the end of it somehow. Fitgnat, to your point, the body's sort of decomposing. You're sitting there with it for the entire weekend. And then Natsuki comes into the room. And she sees this dead corpse and she throws up and runs out of the room. And then Monica shows up. And Monica's like, oh, silly Yuri and her problems. And that's when you sort of realize that behind all of this is Monica.
Just Monica.
She has been the one that has been exaggerating and rewriting some of the code behind these characters so that she can in fact spend more time with you. And if you think back to some of the events that happened, there were some pretty blatant areas where you in fact did not have a choice, and she sort of broke the fourth wall a little bit, came in front of the dialogue box and was starting to really sort of break through the game. And it's at that point where you see up in the top corner, at least on the PS5 version, that characters start to get deleted. You see Yuri gets deleted, her file, and then you see Natsuki's file gets deleted. And then you are suddenly in the end of time and space, in a classroom with some nebulas behind it, and it is just Monica staring at you.
Just Monica.
This was probably the most impactful point of the game for me, because I sat there and read through every bit of dialogue, and it is not something you can just mash X through or skip. It is very partitioned in a way that you read one sort of idea or block of text, and then you wait 10 seconds, and then another one will pop up, and then another one. And it's all like really intriguing, cool, fourth wall breaking stuff. But I want to see is sort of like what stood out to you guys, because, Monica here, she does not care about the player character. She cares about you as a person, as Joel, as Fitgnat. So
This is one of the things that actually freaks me out a little bit, where she referred to me as Joel, which is what I had input my name as, and then she asked, or do you prefer, and then she kind of gave my PlayStation username, and it's like, didn't expect that. That was actually kind of threw me for a little bit of a loop. I mean, I know it's not that hard to do, but I just didn't expect it.
Yeah, how very psycho mantis of her.
Yeah, absolutely.
So what does it do on the PC? Does it just use your Steam ID?
That I don't know.
My only guess would be like whatever you have your computer named as, like for like the original freeware version that didn't have like a Steam profile tied to it. Like that would be interesting to see. Yeah, God, just the ending of this game. I love it so much.
It's so good. I don't know if I regret naming myself Dean, because it's like not Dean but Round 2 Gaming, and I was like, oh, okay, well, they just took my ID. But if I hadn't, and somehow it could find Dean or something, I think that would have shook me a little bit more. But even so, there's some good stuff here.
I obviously just ended up naming my character Andrew, so that did work for me. Like it then it's like, or do you prefer Fitgnat? So that worked for me. With the illusion of choice for this ending that ended up happening by the third playthrough, I toyed with naming my character Dave. I can't let you do that, Dave.
But yeah, you don't expect a character in the game to go outside the game and get information outside the game, right?
Yeah, there's actually a element for it that I don't remember details of this kind of stereotype, but for like visual novel dating sim fans getting heavily obsessed with the girls in the games to the point where they kind of have this parasocial obsession with them. And I even remember like one or two stories hearing about like how people married their game console that had the save file on it. I don't know how exaggerated that was because I don't remember the details of that, but I can imagine that being fairly exaggerated. I don't know if that was on purpose, as I said, but it felt like a really cool, like, turning it back on the player of like, you're not obsessed with the game is obsessed with you.
Yeah.
I think that's a really interesting parallel. I imagine there's some intentionality there, and I think there's also it's also a commentary on the genre, right? And for someone to make something that looks like a dating sim but isn't really a dating sim, it could just be like, oh, it's just a fun way of getting at a story I want, and that would be fine. But it does seem like there's commentary on dating sims, and not necessarily in the sense that I don't think that the creator wants to take down people who play dating sims or people who create them, but I think he's exploring some of the assumptions of going into a game world where everyone who's in the game world exists basically to fall in love with you, and he's kind of looking at that as a setup for like a Twilight Zone episode and saying, well, what does it mean to go into a world where everyone what does it mean to exist in a world where your entire job is to fall in love with a player character? And boy, I sure hope he picks me. And what if he doesn't pick me? And we saw that Yuri will not let you not pick her. And then we saw that Monica steps in and says, "Oh, well, what about me? Forget about Yuri, forget about Natsuki. What about me?" And then she comes in, and every single one of them has this kind of a mental breakdown to one extent or another. And it's like, well, because of the situation that they're in, being in a situation where they're at the whims of a player character of who's the cutest, it's kind of a horrifying situation when you think about it. So you can see how it's fodder.
Yeah, it's kind of, now that you put it that way in the Twilight Zone aspect, it's kind of reverse Truman Show situation, where it's, instead of the person that the world is built around being the person that becomes aware of it, it's the people that are in the world interacting with what would be your character in this instance, because in that narrative you would technically be playing Truman in that situation, but it reverses it, and so it's the character that becomes self-aware and realizes that they're part of kind of a simulation, kind of a Matrix situation. Yeah, that in and of itself is a definite horror storyline.
I really was impressed by some of the things they did, not only with like the dialogue and what she was saying, but how many sort of edge cases they took into account that a player might do to try to bypass or undo some of this stuff. Like, you can't save during this period, you can't load, and that's something that is with you throughout the whole game. You can save and load anytime you want. But at this point in time, she just will not let you. You can get to the screen, but she'll have a dialogue to say, no. You can exit out of the whole game. You can close down the app. You can shut down your PS5 or PS4 or Xbox, whatever. But you turn that thing back on, and she'll be like, I didn't like that at all. I don't want you to do that again. You shouldn't leave. You can try to start a new game, and she'll be like, nah. So all of these attempts to try to like get around Monica is thwarted. And it was only at this point in the game that I realized you could actually go into the file directory of the game. Now, again, I'm not playing on PC, I'm playing on a console, but there is something in the main menu that says exit DDLC, exit Doki Doki Literature Club. And that sort of gives you sort of a makeshift desktop that allows you to start browsing some folders and seeing what may have been going on behind the scenes.
I actually tried to browse the folders, and I couldn't really find anything that I couldn't find anything of note, but I didn't look very deep. But I know there's different things that you can find in it. That friend that I said started playing the game as well, he noticed that only one entity in the game has root access to the kernel on the fake computer. That's a fun little detail. And but I love that whole desktop reveal. Like, when you hit the exit, you expect that to just go to the main menu that you're used to. And that was just so fun. And that's part of the aspect that makes me wonder, like, I would want to play this on PC again, just to see how it's different on PC. And it was given away on the Epic Game Store at one point, so I do have it. But I didn't end up trying it that way yet.
Yeah, having done that myself, it's actually pretty amazing that files are actually being created and you really have access to them, and realizing that what's happening in the game is actually going beyond the game. It's going to these other folders, and files are being rewritten, and you can actually see it. But that being said, there are things that happen with the files here that also require you to literally exit the game and go into your PlayStation settings if you're using PlayStation. And I was pretty impressed about that as well.
I'm not familiar with any of these.
Yeah, you have to access some of the files. You actually have to adjust your console system settings. So it again, it's just there are things that are spilling out beyond the game.
Very cool.
That's awesome. That's super cool.
It's at this point that any complaints I potentially had about how the game was constructed at that point just disappeared. Everything's worth it.
You had mentioned the word kernel Fitgnat. One of the things, I'm sure everybody knows this, but one of the things that I found pretty cool was in looking at one of like the root files in the folder, it was like there were just different lines of code for character 1, character 2, character 3, and then the monitor kernel access. And I was like, oh, monitor kernel access, Monica.
Oh.
And it was like a special line of code for her. I was like, surely everybody saw that, but for me, I was like, I figured this out 7 years and nobody's seen it. Yeah.
I did not see that. I learned something new just now.
But yeah, that's ultimately what the game, quote unquote, forces you to do is to start looking beyond just the press X to progress dialogue. You have to go through the directories, and then ultimately, Joel, why don't you share how to proceed with the game, how to get out of this limbo with Monica?
Nobody wants to hear
stuck in a
about
loop,
that.
and this is the part where you kind of realize that the mechanics of this game are not limited to picking some words on a poem. The mechanics of the game require you to really interact with it at a meta level, and you have to get out of the game and get into the folders and the files. And if you do that and you search through it, you'll find that there's a folder, and Monica's character file is in that folder. And if
Caller dropped.
Oh, that's weird. We lost Joel. Fitgnat, why don't you go for it? How do you actually get rid of Monica?
Yeah, so at that point, you have to actually go into the files.
Caller dropped.
Okay, well now Fitgnat's gone. I don't know what's going on here.
Caller dropped.
There we go. Oh, hi there. I'm glad we can be alone now. The literature club was getting kinda dull. I'm much happier to be in the Cartridge Club with you. Let's see, who's in the chat? We got It's Rocket Sauce. Or should I say, Ryan? Hi, Ryan. Glad you're here. Who else? The mighty Q Dog himself. It's good to see you, Eric. All my favorite Cartridge Clubbers have shown up. Here, let me just turn your volume up for you. Perfect. Now we can hear each other. Thanks for tuning in this month. Do you play Cartridge Club games often? Oh, you guys have a Discord. Let me just add some photos for you. We won't be needing those anymore. Now it can just be us, forever. Hey, what are you doing? Stop! Don't!
Hey, sorry about that, guys. I got kicked off from the call. Do we got everybody? Joel, you there?
Yeah, I'm here.
Cool.
Yeah.
Caleb?
Yep, I'm here.
Cool. Fitgnat?
Yep, I'm here.
Awesome. Okay. Yeah, sorry about that. So where were we? We're going to talk about Doki Doki Literature Club, the game of the month. Well, it's really late. Guys, I think I got the time wrong. I don't think we have much time to talk about the game. Okay, well, for the listeners, this is just your run-of-the-mill, lighthearted dating sim, Doki Doki Literature Club. There's sort of 3 waifus to choose from. You got Sayori, you got Yuri, you got Natsuki, and essentially you write some poetry and you romance them. So I don't know. I guess I wish the Cartridge Club picked a more appropriate game for October, but this was their game of the month. So hope you guys get out, give it a try. Sorry about the timing issue, but I'm sure November is looking pretty good here for a game of the month for everybody to play. Is there anything you guys want to talk about in particular about this game?
Nah.
No, I'm good.
All right. Well, on that note, if you guys would like to get involved with the club, I'd encourage you to follow us on Twitter at Cartridge Club NA. You can also follow us on Blue Sky now, if that's your thing. And you can visit our Discord. That's weird. It's like a bunch of Monica photos here. What is this? Anyway, yeah, you can visit our Discord for past, present, and future games of the month. To those of you who are interested in supporting the club beyond a review on the podcast app of your choice, I'd like to mention that the club is entirely funded by pledges made by members of our community. We're so grateful to these supporters. So if you guys are interested in becoming one of them, please look into how you can do that at patreon.com/Cartridge Club. I want to thank our panel. I also want to quickly plug a great network of people in podcasts called the Polymedia Network. These guys are amazing. Go check out their content. A lot of the communities overlap, and they're just really, really good stuff. So with that, Joel, thanks for coming on. Where can people find you?
Well, I'm in the Discord. My username is QX, and I'm one of the people who you can find in both communities. On Twitter, my handle is JJS Boyce.
Awesome. Thanks for coming on. Caleb, how about you?
I am also one of those overlapping members of the 2 communities, and I co-host a podcast over on the Polymedia Network called Tales of the Lesser Medium. It's where we poke fun at video game narratives, and it's super duper fun. Check it out. Also, I am super obsessed with indoor bouldering, indoor rock climbing, and I am in the current process of actually making a card game that you play at the bouldering gym. So if there's any bouldering nerds out there, please go to Kickstarter and search for Beta Break Card Game, and you will find the card game that I'm working on. I'm very excited for it. It's super fun. One of the very few creative things that seems to have universal praise. I haven't found anyone yet who thinks it's stupid. So this is good. So please go ahead over there if you enjoy bouldering and games.
Yeah, that is really, really cool. So for any listeners of the podcast, it'll be in the show notes. Any watchers of the premiere or on YouTube, just look in the details description and you'll see a link to that Kickstarter. Fitgnat, how about you?
Yeah, I don't have any cool projects going. You can just find me on the Discord. I'm not super active on social media anymore, but if you want to follow me on the app formerly known as Twitter or over on Blue Sky, it is just @Fitgnat on there. But don't
Awesome.
expect any posts, really.
Well, it was great to have you guys on. And thanks to everybody who listened. We look forward to hearing from all of you guys each and every month. Thanks for joining us. And until next time.
Can you hear me? Hi, it's me. So you know how I've been like practicing piano and stuff, and not really any good at it yet, like at all. But I wrote you a song, and I was kind of hoping that I could show it to you because I worked really, really hard on it. So yeah. Every day I imagine a future where I can be with you. In my hand is a pen that will write a poem of me and you. The ink flows down into a dark puddle. Just move your hand right the way into his heart. But in this world of infinite choices, what will it take just to find that special day? What will it take just to find that special day? Have I found everybody a fun assignment to do today? When you're here, everything that we do is fun for them anyway. When I can't even read my own feelings, what good are words when a smile says it all? And if this world won't write me an ending, what will it take just for me to have it all? Does my pen only write better words for those who are dear to me? Is it love if I take you, or is it love if I set you free? The ink flows down into a dark puddle. How can I write love into reality if I can't hear the sound of your heartbeat? What do you call love in your reality? And in your reality, if I don't know how to love you, I'll leave you be.